Okay.
Okay. So in order to solder it, just as a reminder to light your torch, you're always going to start with the gas. Just shy of 1/4 of a turn, use the electronic igniter. For the smaller, thinner pieces that I'm doing right here, I may end up starting with a 2 to 3 inch flame. A 3 to 4 inch is going to be too big for what we need here. If you have larger pieces of metal, you can start with a larger flame. I'm going to go ahead and slowly add my air so that I get that internal cone. It's got a crisp point to it, but it's not so hot that it's that bluish purple, really tight cone, and it's not too wobbly right in here. That's not going to focus the heat the way we want it. So I've got my internal blue cone. I'm going to go ahead and hold it like a pencil. That seems to be more comfortable for most people. And I'm going to come straight down. If I dry this, I'm going to use the feathered part of my flame to dry this. If I dry this too fast, this liquid is going to boil up and it will pop my solder off. So I want to make sure that I'm passing over and giving it a breather, or I'm up here a little bit higher and I'm looking for the color of the flux to turn white. Again, if it starts to bubble, just pull back a little bit, give it a second, and then continue to go on from there. Once that flux is a white color, it's holding that solder in place, and I can now start targeting the heat. I'm going to go ahead and heat the very far spot of it, angling it in a little bit, and then I'm going to heat around the solder chip, getting narrower, and then I'm going to heat right in the front, a little smiley face, and that's just flowed right along that seam. So I started and forced the heat to the seam, then I targeted around, and then I came in just right under here, really equal distance from that solder seam. If I heat this side too much, the solder's going to jump to that side. If this side gets hot first, the solder will jump to that side. So I would go ahead and get my torch turned off and quench that if that was the only piece I was doing, but now I'm going to go ahead and work on this piece right here. This is a little bit different in that this metal's much bigger than the wire, so it's going to take longer to heat that up. It's still fairly small, and I'm still going to use the same idea when I dry it. I'm passing over it just to get that flux so that it's a white, kind of looks like liquid paper. When I start heating, that flux will start to turn almost like a clear syrupy color. That's my clue card that the metal's getting hot enough to almost get to that flow temperature for the solder. So I'm going to go ahead and work on this first. So I'm going to heat at the opposite end of where my solder seam is, and I'm going to force the heat kind of into where that seam is. Once that metal starts to turn colors, I'm going to catch my wire on either end of that and then stop because that wire is getting hot too quickly. I get a little bit closer and it just flowed, and right there I was too hot on my sheet metal, so it jumped directly to that sheet metal. I can come over here and I can pull that solder over, or I can circle on it and get that a little bit hot to reflow it and pull that back to my wire. So the first one, it went straight to that, and then I just used heat to pull it back over. I'm going to go ahead and turn the annealing pan. So I'm going to work on this area right here, and again, it's going to go very quickly. It's pretty hot already, so heat is already transferring over there. So now I just need to circle around that and then come to there, and then it flows. Notice how at the end I came to this side because I wanted it to pull through that seam, and I'm done. So I go ahead and turn